I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to book a solo vacation. Honestly, I was always the family trip type, renting a cabin in the mountains. Beach days with my ex-wife and our friends. Carefully planned itineraries. But after the divorce, the silence in my apartment felt like it had weight. I'd sit there, staring at the TV without even turning it on, just listening to the hum of the fridge. One Friday night, after a glass of wine too many, I clicked book on a small seaside resort I'd once heard about from a colleague. It wasn't expensive, but it promised long stretches of sand, a boardwalk full of music, and the kind of lazy sunsets you only really appreciate when your life feels like it's in pieces. I didn't go there searching for anyone or anything. Truthfully, I just wanted to feel like myself again, away from the apartment that still smelled faintly of her perfume. It was my second morning at the resort. I'd woken up earlier than usual, probably because I wasn't used to sleeping alone in a strange bed, and decided to grab a coffee from the little cafe that overlooked the beach. That's where I saw her. She was sitting outside, a wide-brimmed hat tilted just enough to hide most of her face, flipping through a paperback novel. Something about her caught my attention immediately, not in a dramatic love at first sight way, but in the quiet sense that she looked comfortable, like she belonged there, sipping her cappuccino and letting the breeze play with her hair. The place was crowded, and the only open chair was right next to hers. I asked if she minded, and she looked up with this small, genuine smile that hit me harder than I expected. "Not at all," she said. Her voice had that calm warmth people usually get after years of traveling, or just living fully. We exchanged the usual small talk, where we were from, how we ended up there. She laughed when I admitted I booked the trip on a late-night whim after a rough breakup. "Those are the best kinds of trips," she said. "They lead to the best kinds of stories." At the time, I didn't realize she'd just become mine. After that morning, it became almost natural that we'd run into each other. Or maybe we both made sure of it. Breakfast at the same cafe. Afternoons spent drifting toward the same stretch of sand where the crowd thinned and the waves sounded louder. Her name was Clara. She told me she worked as a freelance designer, which allowed her to take off on trips whenever she wanted. I joked that I admired her for managing to make freedom look like a job. She grinned and told me it wasn't always as glamorous as it seemed. But in that moment, it was hard to believe her. We rented bikes one afternoon and pedaled along the coast, stopping at little fruit stands and eating mango slices sticky with juice. In the evenings, we walked the boardwalk where musicians played old songs that everyone seemed to know. Sometimes we'd just sit in the sand with a bottle of cheap wine, talking until the tide crept close enough to wet our toes. There was no pressure, no heaviness. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was just living. It wasn't just the sunsets or the laughter that drew me in. It was the quiet moments, the kind that sneak up on you when you least expect it. One evening, after a long day swimming and lazing under the sun, we sat on the balcony of our hotel room. She had brought out 2 mugs of tea, and the air smelled of salt and hibiscus. We weren't talking about anything profound, just childhood memories, silly stories about bad dates, her embarrassing first attempt at surfing. But somewhere in the middle of that conversation, I realized I was leaning closer, listening not just to her words but to the pauses, the little sighs between her laughter. She asked me about my marriage, and for the first time since the divorce, I didn't feel the usual heaviness when I answered. I told her about the slow unraveling, the silences that grew louder than arguments, the way 2 people can love each other but stop being good together. She didn't pity me or offer cliches. She just listened, eyes soft, her hand resting near mine on the table until our fingers brushed. It wasn't planned, but I didn't pull away. Neither did she. That small touch felt more healing than months of trying to forget. The week slipped by faster than I wanted it to. Vacations always do, but this one felt especially fragile, like a dream I didn't want to wake from. On our last night, Clara and I sat by the shoreline, the moonlight painting silver paths across the waves. Neither of us wanted to say the word goodbye, but it hung there, anyway, heavy and unspoken. She told me she'd be flying back the next morning to her city, thousands of miles away from mine. I tried to play it cool, telling her I was grateful for the days we shared, that it was enough. But when she leaned her head on my shoulder, I realized how much I didn't want it to end. We promised to stay in touch, though both of us acknowledged how flimsy that promise sounded in the glow of a vacation romance. Still, before we parted, She looked at me with that same small genuine smile from the cafe and said, "Sometimes the right people cross paths at the wrong time. But who knows? Life has a way of circling back." We hugged longer than strangers should, and then she was gone. Back home, everything felt muted. The gray streets, the familiar walls of my apartment, even the coffee shop I usually liked, it all seemed smaller after those white skies and endless waves. I slipped back into my routine, telling myself the trip had been exactly what I needed. A break, a reset, nothing more. A few weeks later, I was sorting through emails at work when a new notification popped up. The subject line read, "Guess who?" It was from Clara. She'd attached a photo of the two of us from the bike ride. Sunburnt, messy-haired, grinning like kids. The message itself was short. I was just remembering this day and thought I'd check in. "How are you really doing?" I must have stared at that email for a good 5 minutes before typing anything back. My heart was pounding harder than it had any right to. I answered honestly that I missed the sea, and maybe more than that. I missed her company. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Her reply came within minutes. And just like that, the silence of my life cracked open again. Our emails turned into long messages, then late-night calls. Before I realized it, Clara had become part of my everyday life. I'd wake up thinking about whether she'd written, fall asleep replaying her laughter through the phone. One evening, after weeks of back and forth, she asked the question I'd been too hesitant to voice: what if we didn't let this just be a vacation memory? I sat there staring at the message. It scared me. After all, I had just crawled out of a marriage that left me cautious, bruised, convinced that love was a gamble I wasn't equipped to play anymore. But when I thought about Clara, about how effortlessly she made me feel seen and light again, the fear started to feel smaller than the possibility. So I wrote back, simple and direct, "Then let's not. Tell me when I can see you again." Her reply, "Mariso." And for the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel like something to dread. It felt like a door quietly opening. It's been months since that trip, and sometimes I still can't believe how it all unfolded. One impulsive decision to book a ticket, one crowded cafe with only a single empty chair, and suddenly my entire outlook on love shifted. Clara and I are still figuring things out. There are miles between us, and real life is never as carefree as seaside sunsets. But we've both chosen to lean into it, to give this a chance instead of letting it fade into a what if. And honestly, that choice feels like the bravest thing I've done in years. Looking back, I realize not all endings are final. My divorce felt like the death of love. But meeting Clara reminded me that love isn't a one-time event. It's something that can surprise you when you're least expecting it, even when you're just trying to escape your own thoughts on a lonely vacation. Sometimes the universe hands you a second chance disguised as a stranger with a smile, and if you're lucky, you're smart enough to take it. Soon turned out to mean 3 weeks later. Clara booked a flight to my city, insisting she wanted to see where I lived, the streets I walked every day, the places I called ordinary. I was nervous, worried reality wouldn't match the magic of the resort. But when I met her at the airport and saw her waving through the crowd, all of that fear dissolved. She hugged me like no time had passed, and suddenly my world didn't feel gray anymore. I showed her the local park, where I went to clear my head, the diner with the best late-night pancakes, even the bookstore I'd been too shy to admit I visited more than once a week. She didn't just smile politely. She asked questions, lingered, soaked it in. She wanted to know me, not just the vacation version of me. That weekend, my city didn't look the same. It was brighter, fuller, like I was seeing it through her eyes. Having Clara here felt like I was seeing my own life, with fresh eyes. The streets I'd walked 1,000 times suddenly held little wonders. The way the sunlight hit the corner cafe window, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery on Main Street, the laughter of children in the park. We spent ordinary days doing ordinary things, grocery shopping, cooking together, debating which old movie to watch. But even these moments carried a weight of intimacy I hadn't felt in years. She had a way of noticing the small details, the things I had overlooked about myself and my life. One night, while we were making pasta in my tiny kitchen, she reached out and squeezed my hand. "It's kind of amazing," she said, "how much life you can see when someone else is looking with you." And in that simple phrase, I realized she wasn't just visiting me, She was changing the way I experienced my world.
Even with all the warmth and laughter, doubt lingered.
I caught myself wondering if this was just another fleeting romance, the kind that feels perfect until reality seeps in. She lived hundreds of miles away, had her own life, her own routines. Could something so effortless survive the distance and the mundane routines of real life? One evening we sat on my balcony, the city lights flickering below. Clara noticed the hesitation in my eyes before I even spoke. "I know it's scary," she said softly. "I feel it too, but maybe it's worth taking the risk." Her words were simple, but they carried a truth I couldn't deny. I thought about the vacation, about how random encounters can hit you like waves, unexpected, unrelenting, impossible to ignore. Maybe life wasn't meant to be safe all the time. And in that moment, I made a choice to embrace this, fears and all. Over the next few weeks, our bond deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. We began planning small adventures together. Weekend getaways to nearby towns, long walks along the river, late-night drives with no destination in mind. Each shared experience stitched us closer, creating a sense of us that felt both fragile and unbreakably real. We talked about everything, dreams we'd abandoned, childhood memories, the tiny quirks that made us who we were. She challenged me gently, nudging me to open up more than I ever had, and I found myself trusting her with things I hadn't even shared with friends. Fears, regrets, hopes for the future. One night, under a sky full of stars, she whispered, "I think I was waiting for you to come along and remind me how alive it can feel." And I realized that she wasn't just a visitor in my life, she was becoming a part of it. Eventually, reality set back in. Clara had to return to her city, and the miles stretched between us like a tangible force, testing the bond we'd formed so quickly. Phone calls, texts, and video chats became lifelines, but nothing could fully replace the warmth of being together. There were moments of frustration, missed calls, delayed replies, the ache of not knowing when we'd see each other next. I caught myself wondering if we had been foolish, if the intensity of the vacation romance had clouded our judgment. But each time doubt crept in, a single memory would push it away. Her laughter as the waves crashed over our toes, the quiet touch of her hand on mine, the way she had looked at me like she'd known me longer than she had. We learned that love, especially new love, isn't just about presence, it's about choice. And each day, despite the distance, we chose each other. Months later, we finally saw each other again. The airport felt different this time, less anxious, more certain. When she stepped through the arrival gate, her smile was the same, but I noticed a quiet confidence in her eyes. We hugged like we had been holding on to each other through the months apart, and in that embrace, all the distance melted away. We spent the weekend exploring new corners of the city, but it wasn't the places that mattered. It was the way we moved together, the easy rhythm that had grown between us. We cooked, we laughed, we sat in silence without needing words. Everything ordinary felt extraordinary, simply because we were together. By the end of the visit, we both knew something had shifted. This wasn't just a fleeting encounter or a vacation memory. This was real, messy, unpredictable life, and we were willing to navigate it together. Looking back, I can hardly believe how a single, impulsive vacation changed everything. A chance encounter at a crowded cafe, a week of laughter and shared sunsets, and suddenly life felt like it had expanded in ways I didn't think were possible anymore. I've learned that love isn't always planned, and sometimes it arrives disguised as a stranger, a smile, a single empty chair at a seaside cafe. It doesn't always come at the right time, but if you're open, it can teach you more about yourself and the world than years of careful planning ever could. Clara and I are still learning, still navigating the distance, still discovering what it means to choose each other every day. But I don't fear the future the way I once did, because I know now that random encounters, however fleeting they may seem, have the power to reshape your life entirely. And for me, that chance encounter became the most beautiful detour I could have ever imagined.